think we're good to go. Good morning, everyone. My name is Frederik. I'm a journalist from Correctiv in Berlin. Thank you very much for coming. Thanks for your interest in our work this morning. I'm here with Cecilia and Giulio, who also work for Correctiv out of Italy. We're here to present one of our recent research projects called The Hidden Fleet. It's an investigation into smuggling in the sea surrounding Italy and the Mediterranean, basically. We published the story in December on the website of Correctiv in several German media. It was also published in Arabic and Greek and here in Italy as well. And it was published in December, but I just wanted to start with two things that happened last week to show you that it's still a very current topic. One thing we did last week, we have a Syrian colleague who works with us in Berlin. His name is Basil. Unfortunately, he cannot be with us today. Last week, he called a smuggler in Turkey, a Syrian person who is associated with the network of smugglers we discovered in our investigation. And he pretended that he wanted to get his family to Germany, so he could basically book a trip again. And we discussed all the details with the smuggler after the EU and Turkey is trying to close the route, the shortest route between Greece and between Turkey and Greece, sorry.
Is suspended. The naval world invented the offshore, basically, when the first pirate buried the treasure in some remote island, possibly. So, of course, this topic is deeply connected to how the offshore works, and of course, is profoundly transnational. There is no fixed place. We talk about the Syrian network of smugglers, but the way they manage it is by bouncing it out of the four corners of the earth. The part that I worked the most on, and what I'm going to talk about now, it was on tracking the actual ships. And of course, this was the funniest thing I ever done in front of a computer. There are databases online, like one is the most important in this sense is marine traffic, that allow you to see the position of every ship in real time as they move at sea. Of course, this is not always reliable, not always possible, because this system is basically a feed of the automatic identification system, IES in brief, that every ship bigger than a certain tonnage has to have on board. Those transponders can be turned off, but when they do turn it off, if you are tracking the movements of the ship daily, you start seeing funny movements, like the recorded speed of the ship is 0, and yet the ship moves, or it appears to be moving on land, or it suddenly appears to be in South China and then it's back in the Mediterranean. So you know they're bouncing off the transponder on somewhere else, and you understand that at least in that moment they turned it off and they didn't want to know where they were going. So working on this investigation, we spent the summer watching this real-time window on what was happening at sea, monitoring in the same time some 50 ships or more, and yeah, it was very exciting. How did we get there? So we started from request to access data from Frontex, freedom of information request that would not be possible to do in Italy, but thankfully, as Frontex is a European mission, we could do it in Germany. So we got a series of names of ship. That was our starting point. Thanks to maritime databases like Marine Traffic, but also thanks to Equasis, which is another very good database, especially good for getting data on companies behind the ship. Well, this kind of documents, we have hundreds of those, tell you the story of a ship, who it belonged to, who it belongs to now, and also where it was stopped for inspection. Here you can see a list of wherever the ship was stopped and inspected, and if deficiencies in its safety measures were found. And in this case, you get records of what happened in each specific port, and sometimes in some ports, thanks to this inspection, you even get hints to who the real owners are. Because of course, all the companies that you get through these databases, all those kind of informations, do not lead you to the actual owners. They lead you to some offshore company that then you don't know who it belongs to. So you have to cross-reference a huge amount of data and put together hints after hints after hints to get to who the real smugglers are, at least. So basically it was this. We started from the first like 15 ships that Frontex gave us, and from there we went up to the companies managing those ships. From the companies we built up the full list of the full fleet that was in control of these people, and we started looking for informations on each and every ship. So the ship changed names like t-shirts very often, but what stays constant is what is called the IMO. It's kind of a license plate for the ship. It's a number that always stays the same throughout the history of the ship, and with that number you can get information on where the ship was and what it was doing, not always, but little hints about it. And oh, sorry, this is not the image I wanted. La mappa, questa qui? No, quella caricata da Google Maps. Okay, it's not here. Doesn't matter. So basically, by analyzing this whole fleet, we discovered that the interests of our network were mainly on three routes. One is weapon trade, let's say, because in some cases it was weapon trafficking and smuggling, in other cases was kind of legalish commerce. So this weapon route that goes from the Black Sea towards the Middle East. Another one is the migrant route that went from Mersin normally, so from eastern Turkey towards Italy. And another one is the drug route going from Morocco to Libya and then from Libya to Europe, Spain or Italy. Because what is the most interesting thing that we discovered by tracking the story of these ships, that thanks to the level of impunity and that this network has, that is due to the difficulties in collaboration and coordination between different police forces in different nations, the very same ships in some cases, but of course the same companies and the same people, before smuggling migrants and before, after, during, for all the time, they were using the same ships to smuggle drugs and to smuggle weapons in the Mediterranean. So this is the image I wanted to show you. This is a highlight of the main routes that we discovered. So Oktyabrsk, close to Odessa, is a famous weapon commerce port. Another one is Novorossiysk in Russia. Those were the loading ports for the main weapon route. The weapon route also goes via Red Sea to Port Sudan, and in a few cases we spotted some ships going as south as Djibouti and Somalia. And of course we didn't follow that track very much because the amount of data that we were getting was huge, and we knew we had to cut it down to something that was manageable in terms of writing a story out of it. But generally speaking, these are the main routes that we found. And of course they work a lot on drugs. The Italian authorities, the Direzione Centrale dei Servizi Antidroga, explained us how the instability in Libya made it so that Libya is becoming a warehouse for Moroccan hashish. They bring it from Morocco to Libya, which is a much less controlled route than any other route from Morocco to Europe. And when the moment is right, even with a high-speed inflatable motorboat, they can bring in the loads they need here in Italy in a safer way. So this is another new form of interest that our smugglers are getting. So they are ever changing, extremely adaptable, and they are really naval traders, like as our subtitle of the investigation that we were seeing before was saying, human being is just another commodity, and they deal in commodities, and humans are the only self-paying cargo. So the problem, smuggling migrants means they lose the ship, because when the ship arrives it's blocked, while with other cargoes it's much easier for them to get the ship unseized and retake the ship bring in a new crew, because it's always the crew that gets the worst, the short end of the stick in this deal. The crews are arrested, charged with drug trafficking, even if they are like 18 years old kids from India that don't know anything about what the ship is actually carrying. And surely they don't choose the cargo, they don't choose the routes, they just get orders. But when they are caught, they are the ones that get charged. While our people, very well hidden in a way that Cecilia will explain to you better, just send a lawyer or contact a local naval agent to get the ship released and use it again. So humans, with migrants, it's been impossible for them to reclaim the ship, but those are old ships which value is around 400,000 euros maximum, normally around 200,000 euros. And a trip full of 800 migrants paying thousands of dollars each can be worth up to 8 million euros. So it's a good end for the ship, because the only other end they could possibly do is being sold for scrap metal. So those are old ships that they use for this kind of deals. Other cargoes are more valuable. We estimated that drugs and weapons can be more valuable as a single trip, but of course you need to deliver it. And there are many middlemen who will get their own cut in this kind of deal, while migrants are a very easy cargo. Just load them, get paid cash, and the trip is done basically. Once the ship is loaded, it's also impossible to block the trade anymore. Like if you stop a cargo filled with weapons, most possibly the one organizing the commerce will not get paid. The deal is blocked. But once a ship full of migrants is spotted off the coasts of Italy or Greece, it becomes a matter of saving human lives. So the cargo is delivered. The smugglers are happy, they've been already paid. And they can also advertise, as Frederik was saying, they're starting to advertise again. They can also advertise that their way of traveling is much safer than any other way of traveling towards Europe, more successful and all of that. That's why they can keep asking for high prices on their route. I would pass to Cecilia. She will explain how we went deeper after tracking the fleet. We started tracking the people, and yeah, maybe talk about something.
Okay, can you open one of the Equasis documents just to? So I think the very first thing that we need to explain you is that for us, in order to identify who were the people behind the ships, we first had to identify which were the companies involved. And basically for each ship you have basically you have three entities, because you have the commercial manager, which is also basically the operator of the ship, then you have the owner, and then you have the ISM manager. Basically, it's a company that manages the security on board and is usually responsible also for the crew. Theoretically, this company is not involved with the loads, with the containers, with whatever is loaded on the ship. But in this specific investigation, we found out by analyzing all the records of all the over 50 ships that Giulio told you about. I think in the end were even more than 50. We ended up noticing that in most cases, especially for the ships that brought the migrants, but then we discovered also for the ships that brought drugs and weapons around the Mediterranean, that the companies were kind of belonging to the same entity. So they had different names, they were registered, most of them offshore in different places, but they either shared an address, or what was more interesting, on the history of the ship that we could get through Equasis, we could see that basically there was a kind of passing the baton from a company to another. So over the years, there was like a kind of a pattern that you could see, that a company would pass the ship to another company, either as a manager or an owner, and then a few years later, another of the owners that we knew will pop in. And so, like, at the end, we had a network of about like 10, 15 companies that were always present in these ships. So that was really the start. And then at that point, we wanted to know who was behind these companies, and obviously this was all but easy. Why? Because some of the companies were registered in Syria, and obviously, considering the situation, we couldn't access to any company registered in Syria. And second, because the others were registered offshore. So Marshall Islands, BVI, this kind of Liberia, and so on and so forth. for example, our colleagues from the African Network of Investigative Reporting, ANSIR, helped us out in getting Liberian documents, and we paid for a Marshall Island document, $200, to get a nice shiny paper saying this company is managed by this wonderful nominee lawyer, full stop. So we needed to take it another way. One of the countries which is still considered a tax haven, but we could break into a bit more, was Honduras. And thanks to the support of the investigative dashboard of the OCCRP network, we could get a reporter in Honduras who could actually physically go to the company registry and get information about the companies, some of the companies that were incorporated there. We couldn't do the same with Belize, for example, which is close by. A complete different approach, no way of getting company registration. And curiously enough, the more we investigated, the latest ships that were stopped, they all had companies registered in Belize. So we couldn't break into that. But we found a way to go around this problem of knowing who's exactly in the company through company registry, and we found other ways. For example, one of the breakthroughs that we had at one point, it was linked to, we started with one of the ships of the migrants, it's called Ezadeen, and we could figure out how, in the history of the ship, so the ship was managed by Syrian incorporated companies, but in the history of the ship, you had a ship owner called Kafaji, and by surfing the web, we found out the website of this guy advertising his ships, and by Googling the names of the ship, we found out that one of his ships was stopped with weapons in Lebanon, weapons that were, in all the cases that we analyzed, weapons were not officially directed to Syria. They had like bill of lading for like Africa or other places. But then the investigators at the time said, okay, most likely they're actually going to Syria. So we had a hint, and we started investigating Kafaji. He was the one incorporated in Honduras, so we could confirm. But then, okay, once we got information that he was the owner of those companies, we were stuck. And then we got another idea. We checked the address because, curiously enough, the man was based in Egypt. His companies were incorporated in Honduras, but he had a Romanian address in Constanța. And Constanța, together with Piraeus, was one of the main maritime centers at the moment. So we, together with another corrective reporter who speaks Romanian, we started investigating Romania, and we found out that that address was quite interesting because there was a bunch of Romanian companies registered at, no trace of our Honduras company, but we started analyzing the other Romanian companies at the same address, and we found out that there was a Syrian family behind this bunch of Romanian companies, shipping companies, all of them. Then through a social network, we managed to construct also all their fleet, which, pairing to the list of ships that we already had, we figured out that some of the ships we already had belonged to these people. And they were friends on Facebook with our Kafaji man. And actually, we figured out from their page that they were managing ships together. Through the social network analysis, which was then validated by the, I would say, absolute crucial help of Basil, the Syrian reporter Frederik told you about, we could really pair this information with the stuff that they were writing in Arabic on their own pages and so on and so forth. And we could really prove how the companies within the, for example, Ezadeen and other ships, the Nur-Am is another ship that was stopped with weapons, was managed by the same people. So in the end, what we came up with, if you can show the first, yeah. So this is the first map we drew, which was not a definitive one. But basically, our first guess was, okay, we told like the Markabi family was a kind of center to another 4 blocks of people that we had there, and so like we started drafting this map. But in the end, this is the one up on the left is all the Romanian block connected to the Honduras companies that they're connected directly to the Syrian block in the center. Then if you can show the other map. But then we reasoned with Frederik that in the end, by analyzing all their ships and the way they moved and how, like which, not, I don't know if it's big enough, but in the end we thought, okay, the way also the ships that were stopped while we were investigating, also for like both for hashish and for weapons, we figured out that most possibly they're in a kind of cooperative, as we could show in the investigation, again, like the offshore is absolutely crucial for them to manage all this business. And the reason why it's crucial because, as Giulio was saying before, when authorities from Italy, Greece, and Spain have been trying to investigate this network, they always stopped at the, really like against the wall, because every time they try and collaborate with these jurisdictions, you can just imagine the result is no collaboration whatsoever. And we're not just talking about, I don't know, like Belize or Marshall Islands, but we're also talking about Lebanon or like, you know, Romania's Europe is collaborative, but still, those people know how to hide. So if they open a Romanian company that then is controlled by a Belize company, even Romanian authorities get stuck. So what we, at this point, what we did was to tell a story of what we had. We had a lot through social network as well, but we could also, we went to speak to Italian authorities because when we initially figured out that Italian authorities and Greek authorities didn't have a lot of information, because every time they tried, so when the first ships arrived to Italy filled with migrants, obviously they opened investigations down in Sicily and Calabria. But in order for them to investigate, they had to ask Lebanon and other countries for collaboration. Obviously, they cannot ask Syria for collaboration. And information didn't go through. So what we started doing, it was like talking to people who researched this kind of word already, like, for example, C4Eds, which is an American NGO that worked on the weapon trafficking, and experts from the UN. And at one point, the experts from the UN said, well, we're not following those ships that much anymore, but what we can tell you is that at one point we noticed that one of the ships, it was based, the companies were based in Turkey, has been stopped in Spain for hashish. So we said, okay, that's very curious. So we started scouting the web, and we discovered that Italy and Spain had a large anti-drug operation in the Mediterranean linked to hashish. And we got a list of ships, and we figured out that some of them, we had them on the list. They had been bringing either weapons or migrants to Italy or other places. So we asked the Italian authorities for the IMO, basically is like the number of the ship, right, that he explained before. But the Italian authorities didn't have it, and then thankfully we got this information from Spain. Like initially they said, you know, it's like sensitive information. But in the end, the press office of the Guardia Civil, they said, no, actually we can give it to you. And it was absolutely crucial, because from then on we could track all the ships, because as Giulio said, they already had changed name, all of them. Because that's very interesting. Every ship, when they change name, like if they get seized for hashish, a month later they will be released and given back to the ship owner, to the ship manager, because it's very costly to keep a ship in a port for no reason. So the crew will get arrested, possibly get on a trial, and end up in jail in Italy for a few years, although they might not be involved at all. And the ship owner gets a ship back. And the ship changes name, and they usually incorporate an offshore company with the same name. So we have a very good example. I will now let Giulio talk about it, which is the Haddad one. It was stopped very recently, and is exactly this example. Like, the Haddad one is incorporated by Haddad Company.
I'm not sure if we can go, I mean, there are a number of examples of this. We were seeing this before when Cecilia was explaining you how there are 3 company entities that manage every single ship that is around. In this case, you see that the registered owner, which is normally always, is the most secretive one. That's the one that's always in a tax haven. Somewhere in the Marshall Island or somewhere. And those are companies made one ship, one company. Like, it's very cheap to open a company. So you have a ship and you open a company somewhere secret. That company owns that ship and that's it. And in all cases you see something like that. Care of IMS Hellenic. So we knew in this case that the IMS Hellenic legally appears just as a manager of the ship, not as the owner. But we know that this company is just a company created to own this ship, and it was going to be this company here who manages this, who actually owns it, or at least who extensively and repeatedly manages it, and who's responsible for everything that the ship does. So we organized the trip to Greece. As you can see, this company is registered in Greece, and it was one of the most interesting companies, the one that had most links to each and every kind of traffic. And of course, it was very interesting. It has been discussed at length why Greece is the paradise of ship owners. They basically pay no taxes. So Greece is not technically a tax haven, but it is if you're a ship owner. And you're not required to register your company in the normal company register. Shipping companies have a special company register, which is not accessible to the public. Like if you open a bar, then your name will be in the company register. But if you open a shipping company, you can stay quite hidden also in Greece. So Greece is a neuralgic center for the organization of this kind of traffics. And of course, IMS Hellenic was there, and then we tracked down the owners of IMS Hellenic to be Syrians. And when we went to that office, it's in a kind of a derelict building in a not very nice part of Piraeus. There was the porter at the door who was trying to convince us that no company with that name has ever been there. And it's been very complicated to actually discover that, because if you go there and ask for IMS Hellenic, it is actually not there. Only by analyzing the websites, going back through the website to who registered the website, and by checking the phone numbers on the Greek company phone number, we discovered that IMS Hellenic had not its name there because it was managed by another company there, some Musa shipping company. And when I go to the door of Musa shipping company, I see a piece of paper saying that he hadn't paid the bills of the building for months or something. And I asked next door, and I say that as soon as the problem started, he had escaped to, he went away. We asked, and we discovered in the end that he was in Dubai, which is a place that has no extradition treaty, is very safe. I mean, Amadeo Matacena, for all Italians here, is happily there, avoiding his trial. And so it's become another refuge for this kind of people, because there's not a good collaboration with them on this kind of issues. So yeah, Greece, of course, was very interesting, and also, I mean, there we had the chance to do, because this was a very mixed investigation. Everything we spoke about so far is of a data-driven investigation. We scouted databases, collected huge amounts of data, and analyzed it. The C4Ads organization that Cecilia was talking about wrote a very interesting report on what they call the Odessa network. So a series of companies, part of which are in our network, who facilitate weapon traffic in the Black Sea, and they gave us some help. So everything so far is data-driven, but the extra step to really understand how this thing worked, we had to do it traditionally. So we went and found sources in Greece who were knowledgeable enough of how the naval work works, and not only they gave us crucial documents that confirmed the Marcabi name and other important names in our network, but he also explained us something that was very important to keep in mind. He said that he had worked before in Syria and Lebanon as a naval agent, and he said that it's normal for, in that part of the world, to build big cooperatives and let everybody get a little cut of the deals. So with that in mind, we kept on investigating, we tried to find connection, and of course, we knew that already when we started the social network investigation, so we knew what we were looking for, context among people. And yeah, again, Frederik worked close to Basel in that part of the investigation, so I don't know, I pass the word to him again on this.
So I will just maybe conclude, and then we also want to have enough time for questions, obviously. So as Giulio said, it was a lot of data involved, but I think one of the big challenges was that what you discover is a network, but it's not a crime, or it's not relevant to be part of a network of business relationships. And shipping basically is always a network. Then in that network, you have incidents of ships being seized, either with migrants or weapons, or hashish in this case. And whenever you have a ship seized, it opens up information because documents start to appear in court cases, or you can actually go to the port where it happened and speak to people. But only in those instances there is a way in for journalists to gather information. But the rest of the network, you can see it, but it's very difficult to tell the precise relationships. It's very difficult to tell because of all the intransparency in the shipping world. You know, who played which role, and also for the storytelling is also very difficult because you cannot blame someone for, you know, operating a shipping network, and unless you can. So you have a lot of people, but not everyone is tied to a specific incident, you know, of committing a crime, such as smuggling weapons with faked bill of ladings. So that's why it was very important not only to do the data approach, but to do other more traditional approaches, to speak to prosecutors, which was not very useful, because law enforcement normally works much slower than journalists, because as Giulio explained, cross-border information, for us it's very easy to exchange it, but for law enforcement it's very difficult. It can take months and years. We also spoke to refugees. I met a family that was on board of one of the ships, and I spoke to them, and they knew the owner of the ships, of that particular ship, so that was an important cross-reference. And then we were really lucky that we could hire a Syrian colleague who not only could help us with information on Syria and the background of some of these people, but he had actually fled the war himself, and he had tried to take the same route from that port of Mersin in Turkey. He tried to get onto one of the ships that we investigated. So he had actually met some of the smugglers himself, and so he came into the research at a later stage when we had already identified the network. So it was a very important moment then when I showed him our kind of the people we had identified on Facebook, and he identified them again as being involved in this network. So this is how we try to cross-reference the data that we found in the databases as much as we could. And I think we have about 15 minutes left, if I'm not mistaken.
Maybe a bit more, but yeah.
We would like to engage with you as much as possible. If there's any questions you would like to ask us in English or in Italian, we can translate it as well. So please, if there's any questions.
Yeah, I don't know if the mic is coming. Mike, can I come?
Thank you very much for your work. My name is Lorenzo Trombetta. I'm working in Lebanon as a freelance journalist, and I'm following the Syrian side of the story of the Syrian war, the Syrian conflict. My question was, since I read in Al Hayat newspaper your work, or a part of your work, the title was mentioning important responsibilities in Latakia and Tartus ports. I assume that your Syrian colleague perhaps could have more explanation on this part of your work, but I would like to pose you the question, how deep you could have gone to understand the connections of Syrian individuals in this story. You mentioned the Khafaji. I don't know if Khafaji is a Syrian one, he has a Syrian passport or not, and who could be charged as Syrians in this issue, and what are the responsibilities of Syrian individuals, perhaps also Syrian authorities, as far as you know in this story? Thank you.
Okay, so I'm not sure if we can fully answer to your question. We will surely try. The importance of Latakia and Tartus as ports emerged from the beginning, both from the home registered port of companies and ships that we were analyzing, and from the analysis of their actual routes. They would stop at those ports very often bouncing up and down Cyprus, which is also a known place for some kind of weapon smuggling. Very often weapon smuggling ships pass through Cyprus or northern Cyprus. So we knew that those places were central, and we would have loved to investigate more on what is actually happening in those ports at the moment, although the data we found later showed us that possibly they only have local agents who know very little actually work. Possibly, again, we weren't able to explore first person these ports, but we found that all decisions were taken either in Greece or in Dubai or in other places. So the centrality of these ports is, of course, all the companies are their home ports are either Tartus or Latakia or Tripoli in Lebanon. So those places are central. I don't know what you want.
I mean, the network is Syrian. They are mostly all Syrian, but they don't seem to be there anymore. I think so, I mean we have a lot of names, but maybe to describe them, it's old shipping families based in Tartus and Latakia in these ports, and some of them have fled the war as well, I think, or they operate out of Turkey, out of Dubai, out of Greece, but they are Syrian mostly. But it's been extremely difficult to do research on that part because we could not go to Syria for security reasons. It was very difficult to build up sources inside Syria also for security reasons. We try to understand what is the relationship between these people and the regime, and for a long time we also tried to establish whether the regime was directly involved in the migrant smuggling on those 15 ships. In the end, we could not establish a direct link, even though we found some companies of the Assads in Panama, but I think in 2013, because in Panama you can still look up, if I'm not mistaken, who owns the company, but in 2013 they were moved to the Marshall Islands where that's not possible. We also tried to reach out to the opposition to find out whether they have anything, but they're scattered all over the place, not very organized, and only busy with documenting human rights abuses and doing other work. So that was extremely difficult to get information out of Syria.
Collaterally, I mean, it's not directly related to your question, but the crews, whenever there were Syrian crews bringing migrants here, their perception of this and the way they can sell it to themselves and to the rest of their people is that they're actually doing a humanitarian work because they are bringing people away from the war, and the numbers are not in possession of the crew. The captain was paid 30,000 euros, which is nothing compared to what the trip is worth, and all the rest of the crew was, of course, paid much less. Less than the single ticket of a migrant, of course, but their perception of it is that they were helping their people to get out of the country. So, again, there are always different sides of the story.
Are there other questions?
Yes, I don't know what here from Fighter. I have a question concerning Wolfgang Blau, formerly Guardian, has said concerning the Panama Papers, he talked about asymmetric warfare, so to speak, like corporations, transnational corporations of journalists against, so to speak, criminal or other networks, economic networks. I'd be interested a little bit more in detailing your research network, so to speak, like this one side of, if you wish, asymmetric warfare.
You mean research network in terms of?
Yeah, who you collaborated with, how many people were involved, maybe you can quantify or go a little bit more into detail.
Maybe we'll take 2 questions at a time and then we answer them.
I think it's only, they need it for the streaming, but we hear you very well, so please go on.
Thanks first. My name is Eileen and I'm a PhD student in human rights, and I'm actually investigating the smuggling route from North Africa, so I found that very interesting. My question is whether in your investigations of these data, did you find any, or did you get a sense of any connection between smugglers from different routes? Did you get a sense that, is it possible to talk of a sort of a market in a sort of a unified sense? Or did you find that we're talking of, because the feeling I have is that they're small groups, and then at times they collaborate because maybe it's convenient, but I never actually got a sense of one system of smuggling that collaborates. Thanks.
Thank you.
I can answer to your question. I mean, from what I know, at least very easily, yours deserves a longer explanation. Maybe I missed some information, but the thing is, it's all a matter of how much the boat you use cost. So the smugglers that operate from North Africa can steal a fisherman's boat or use a very, very cheap inflatable, and they don't need the level of organization that the smugglers from the far side of the far east of the Mediterranean need. So it's a completely different effort. And I mean,
a practical example. I totally agree with what he said, and I think when you analyze the hashish smuggling, we got this insight from the anti-drug authority in Italy, the inchiesta. They told us how they really saw a completely change of strategy over the last year and a half. Before, you would have like small fishing boats bringing hashish up to Spain, but lately, since this network of Syrian smugglers got into the Mediterranean so powerfully and aggressively, they have basically they have offered a service which is much better. Instead of filling loads of small ships, the small boats, basically these large cargo ships are filled offshore. So they usually do not enter ports. The hashish is loaded and then is brought to Europe. In many cases, though, they're noticing that large stocks of hashish are now being stocked in Libya on the coast. And there you have small groups. So there is the only part where you could have a connection, because according to them, it's the same groups that then smuggle migrants on the small inflatable to Italy. But there is no connection, as Giulio said, between the big trafficking that we analyze and those organizing the ships, if not the hashish connection, meaning like they pay them to stock the hashish there. And possibly they use this money to organize the shipping of migrants to Italy. That's the only connection point that we found, I think.
Do you want to answer the question on the research department? Start. I mean, it's a long question. Okay. On the answer to the question from the colleague from Austria, I'm not familiar with the term asymmetric warfare, and this I haven't read that, but I mean, because of the nature of our subject, cross-border crime, let's say, it was obviously very crucial to collaborate with people in many different countries. We didn't have a formal network, a formal collaboration, and we didn't have a lot of means at our disposal as well. So we depended a lot on our personal contacts of reaching out to journalists in different countries. We had, from previous researchers, in particular Giulio and Cecilia, have contacts in many places. They worked in Africa before. So we had a contact in Greece who works for Marini newspaper, excuse me. So he helped us a lot, and we had colleagues in Africa who could look up documents. We had, in the beginning, we focused a lot on Turkey. We have a colleague there who helped us. So this was more like an informal exchange. They get stuff for us, and then if they need something from our area of expertise, we try to give them stuff as well. So that was it was like a network, but very informal.
The only thing I always say to add to this is that economy has been transnational for centuries. Crime is transnational. It's been transnational at least for decades. it's just about time that journalists start consistently working in a transnational network. It's the only way we can actually report on these issues. There's no other way. So yeah, some people can do it more formally, such as bigger organization or older organization. We are building our network, and we are, I mean, we collaborate. Hopefully all organizations of our kind will find a way to collaborate with each other on specific topics. Maybe we can take another question. Then they told us our time is running out. We will be available even when, even after that, outside. But if there is a last question or something.
I wanted to ask something. Go on. Where is the mic? It's okay. Okay.
Oh, it's 24.
Yeah, we still have 5 minutes. You want to have this mic? It's okay. Okay, we hear you. Yeah.
It's on its way, just one thing.
It's actually clearer when you speak without mic.
Okay. I wanted to know, like, after publishing the information, like you wrote about, what happened? Like, were there some consequences? Because you told, like, the government, they had no information for you, like, it was really difficult to have the contact. So afterwards, was there a progress? Was there someone contacting you? I'm really interested in this.
We are for what we can, we are collaborating when they ask with the authorities by giving them what we already published. I mean, of course, what is unpublished or what is confidential, it's part of our trade to keep it confidential. But for everything we can and for everything we publish, we have been giving lists of ships and companies, and the information that we published may be just written in a more schematic form, less narrative, to the authorities in Italy who are trying to get beyond this.
In Germany, I think it was we published it in December. In January or February, they made some arrests. They arrested 5, I believe, Syrians who are accused of being part of a smuggling network, and the prosecutors, they did mention 3 of the 15 ships that these people were involved in. Yeah. So I think time is over. Thank you very much. If you still have other questions, we're going to be here for some time. Just approach us. And thank you very much for your interest.